So in my previous video, I talked about how in the digital media age, when consumers are so spoiled for choice in terms of the kind of content they want to consume, how they consume it, where they consume it, when they consume it, on what device they consume it. I talked about how in this environment, they are no longer tolerant of interruption. And let's face it, interruption has been the currency in which marketers and advertisers have been using for decades. So the challenge is, as a brand, how do you create content that draws people in? How do you create content that people will not avoid, but actively seek out and want to consume? Now, if you study filmmaking, you will learn about what I like to refer to as the building blocks of storytelling. So first you have the hero's journey, which manifests itself in movies as the 3-act story structure. You also have what Christopher Vogler refers to as the 8 character archetypes, right? The 8 kinds of characters that you see in almost every single film that you will ever watch. And the important question to answer is, what is then the role of the brand in that story? And one of the more counterintuitive things that you need to accept, especially if you are classically trained in advertising, is that the brand should not be the hero of your story. Now, apart from storytelling itself, the other thing that, of course, big film companies, big entertainment companies have mastered is how to build an audience. And this is a very, very important distinction, because it means that you have to start thinking about audiences less so than customers or consumers, right? In other words, it has to be about how to entertain, how to entice people, how to draw people into your content, rather than simply how to get them to buy your product. And that is a huge mindset leap that brands need to learn. Now, a great illustration of how this audience approach works is a hand-scribbled note, which, as the story goes, was actually pinned to the wall of Walt Disney's office in 1957. In it, it outlines the entire Disney empire's strategy. And if you look at it carefully, it shows that at the center is Disney's audience that they have built around their theatrical business. And through that, they get into music, they get into television, they get into book publication, they get into merchandising, and of course, they get into theme parks. All of those business, all of those monetization strategies are possible only because Disney started first by building that audience around its content, around its core theatrical product. Now, that is another counterintuitive way of thinking for most traditional marketers. The idea that you focus first on building the audience and figuring out how to drive sales a little bit further down the road. The way I like to think about it was actually a phrase first coined by, I believe, Robert Rose and Joe Pulizzi in their book, Killing Marketing. And that is, you need to think about your audience, not just as an audience, but as your pre-customer database, right? That means that you build an audience first, create content that draws people in, create content that keeps people coming back and makes them loyal to what you have to offer. And then the monetization will follow down the road. Now, of course, even though I'm using Disney as an example, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have, Disney level production values all the time. There are some brilliant examples of brands that have, of course, made some really high-end productions in order to build their audiences, but there are also examples of SMEs who have created really, really valuable content and built an audience around their brand, using things as simple as their YouTube channel or even just an email newsletter. Join me for my lectures about how brands should behave like media companies and learn lessons from Hollywood.